bitches, every city in my tribe. Look behind. Booty dominate the world, peaches ripe.
Hi, how are you? I haven't talked to you in a long time.
It's been a minute.
So, I'm not going to talk about abortion. So, because I know we have big disagreements with that. But, I was about the sex health education. Is that what you're talking about the when they say they don't say gay bill?
The Don't Say Gay bill is kind of in its own lane. Honestly, I think it's I don't really think it's like serious legislation.
Okay, so like I feel like people who like don't like that bill, like I think that parents feel like it's taking the control away from them of what their children learn or what they're exposed to. And I feel like that's might be a slippery slope. Like, at what point does the school board or district decide what a child can learn or what's educational?
Well, I mean, like parents kind of when they put their kids into public school, yes, they are essentially putting the school in charge of the child's education.
So,
like when you enroll your child for like, let's say like elementary school, you don't go in there and you're like, well, I want them to learn addition, but don't teach them multiplication. Like,
right.
nobody expects the teachers not to do that. When you when you enroll your children into school, you are essentially giving the school board and the school authority over your children to teach them the curriculum.
But not over like controversial topics, though.
I mean, what would you classify as controversial?
Like that's why they had like the big. I think was it in Virginia where the the guy said that parents shouldn't have a right in what their children learn, and
Well, no, I
like
don't agree with that. But also, when we're talking about like controversial topics, I would say that some of those controversial topics are actually like historic events that happened. Should we now be like restricting children from learning this if like their parents don't agree?
like what?
Like, let's say racism, let's say slavery.
Yeah,
Like, if the parent
CRT.
doesn't.
So, like, I don't want to get into that because, but
Huh?
like,
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Why don't I want to get into CRT?
Yeah, like CRT is just another example of something that should be taught in schools that for some reason parents have take issue with.
I mean, I don't think we should teach like young kids that.
Why not?
So, like, I don't think that it's right to tell people that because they're a different color, like the world's out to get them.
No, that's not
That's
necessarily what
not what
critical.
CRT is.
So, and another thing, like, what's like the anti-purity? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, because
What's wrong with purity culture?
yeah,
A couple of things. When we look at sex, essentially it has three purposes, which is biological, psychological, and social. And purity culture teachings have great psychological and social damage for people.
like what?
Especially, well, when it comes to social damage, it really essentially tells women that how they act and how they present themselves in society will be how men treat them. Which is why to dress modestly, because if you aren't, then essentially you're asking for it, which is a similar paradigm to SA culture. It absolutely is.
No. So it's like saying like to dress appropriately.
What do you mean?
Well, like,
why is it inappropriate to not dress modestly?
But also, who gets to define what's appropriate and what's not? Like, do women get to define that? Like, does the society get to do that? Do men get to do that? Legislators get to do that?
Well, I mean, if if someone, if a woman,
Why do you want a woman to dress modestly?
no, I think it's for self-respect. I'm not saying that someone who's
Wait, but I can respect myself and wear bikini and then respect myself and completely cover. It's the same.
Yeah,
You
I
can
feel
still
the
have
same
the same
about
respect.
myself, regardless of how much clothes I'm wearing.
right. So I think it's more like a societal thing where they say we don't for the same reason people in business don't dress like like I'm trying to think of the right word to say that's not offensive. They don't they dress respectively, right? Or quote unquote respectively because they want to be probably
I guess you're
unfairly.
trying to say dress the part, but in everyday life you are not
Right.
dressing
It's
for
right. It's unfair that think people that I will agree with you that if um like for someone in a position of it for for someone with a woman in a position of that requires high education, if she dresses quote unquote inappropriate, it's looked down upon. But
right, I would say that's unfair, but
right.
if you look at it within that perspective, do you think it would be fair if, let's say, I applied for a job and I came in with a tank top and shorts and I was extremely overqualified, and then someone else came in for the job and they were underqualified, but they were quote unquote dressed for the occasion or dressed for the job? Who do you think is more qualified for the job? Who do you think
Right.
should get the job?
Right. But first impressions are unfortunately 90% of
Correct, but value isn't placed
We're
on how
we're
you're
just
dressed.
talking about necessarily in society, not when you go to apply for a job. Why should in society women
well
dress
because
modestly? Because
well
we're
because
talking about purity culture.
right. And so I would argue that it starts at a young age, right? I went to private school, and purity thing was you should dress modest to show you have respect for yourself, so that you don't want to quote unquote sexualize yourself, so you want to have
What
respect
is
for
wrong
yourself.
with
I'm not saying that's right or
just
wrong. I'm just
because
saying
you're
Well,
not
no,
dressing modestly does not mean that you are sexualizing yourself.
right. I
So
can
is it
respect
okay
myself in a
for a
crop top.
woman to not dress modestly? And honestly, what is modest in this scenario?
like if you went for a job.
We're not talking about job interviews. We're
uh,
talking about anti-purity culture, and this is the issue that I take with it, is essentially that women's value are based on their appearance, especially when it comes to men. And that's why typically men objectify women more, because they simply see them as an object, not as an actual human being. And that's why sex workers are looked down upon, because they're
right.
seen as less than a person, which I feel is really a stereotype that right now you're upholding. That if you don't dress modestly, if you engage in sex work, then you are less of a person. So I do take issue with you essentially kind of objectifying and dehumanizing women at that stance.
No, I don't think people who like I don't think that people who work in sex work are less than. I think that there's a stigma because prostitution has been illegal and people associate all forms of sex work with prostitution. And
What?
as that, I think people associate sex work as taboo and as essentially bad.
So
So I
wait,
feel
I'm
like that's
sorry. You're for purity culture and for sex work?
no. I said that's why I feel like people look down on that because it's taboo, and people have taught that taboo is bad.
So would you say that like purity culture is also taboo? Like dressing a certain way is like taboo?
No, because like I guess it's like probably old fashioned, like, but like
It's not that it was taboo, it's that they literally thought these people were less than.
I wouldn't go that far. I would just say like it's like I said, like taboo. Like,
Sorry, not to interrupt, but I do
that's
have homework, so I'm gonna go, Kenzie. But
All right.
we'll catch up
I'm
later.
gonna stay on.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah. Bye.
I'm so fucking cute, bitch. I'm so fucking cute.